Hello, everybody. Peter Murphy here with the Buying Tampa Bay podcast. Today, I'm here without my co-host, Chase Clark, because Chase is actually in the guest seat today. Many of you want to be real estate entrepreneurs. You may wonder if you have what it takes to break out of wherever you are that you currently find yourself and try something new and life-altering. And although everyone's journey into entrepreneurship looks a little different, in the next few episodes, we're going to interview some of the realistic entrepreneurs to hear their sides of the stories of development and self-discovery and evolution from wherever they started into entrepreneurs and community builders and change agents and the men and women who are making a difference in their communities and in the fields of real estate. So we look forward to talking to all of these entrepreneurs today. And we'll go back as far as they'll let us and ask as many questions as we'll have time for, with the goal that you might see yourself in their story and be inspired to do something equally brave. If brave is the right word even, right, Chase? So welcome to the show as our guest today.
Yeah, well, I got to be brave today, man. It's interesting being on the other side of the seat here, and being asked all the questions. But, I kind of like this journalistic type approach and getting into some biographical stuff because I love hearing about other people's stories. And the story behind people is really the anecdote to what makes them tick and why they do what they do and how they've done what they've done. And so hopefully as we kick this series off, people learn a little bit more about me today, maybe you next week, and, some other people in the future that have some interesting stories to tell.
Well, my story would be like 5 minutes long. It's not all that deep and meaningful, but unlike yours, I've got some stuff I'm really interested in, and I probably have never even asked you. And, we've been partners for a long, long time. So I'm really looking forward to this episode as well. And, so right out of the gate, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? I think that really affects people's perspective, their life perspective. And I'd like to hear anything you want to share that you'd like to share about your upbringing and your backstory and, all those kinds of details that will help us round out who Chase Clark actually is.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting, a little bit unconventional, actually, started in March of 1979. And boy, how blessed I feel like I am today, looking back to have been born at that time and having been able to experience all the things that we've experienced over the past, 40 years at the times in my life that I've been able to experience them. But I was born in Ocala, Florida, sleepy little town at the time, about 30,000 people, known for its horse farms and, country living, and really fortunate to have been born in a place like that in hindsight, but when you're growing up there, it seems boring and slow and nothing to do. And, thank goodness we were, 45 minutes from the gates to Disney World, which we maybe went once a year. And we had a local water park next to Silver Springs called Wild Waters, which if we were really lucky, I think for $8, you could go there for the whole day. And it was a pretty cool place, looking back on the memories of those big water slides and the wave pool and stuff like that. But I was adopted at birth. And so my story is a little bit unconventional in that way, but not terribly unconventional because, I didn't even know I was adopted probably until I was about, 7 or 8 years old. My parents had that conversation with me. And if you look at me today, my personality, my mannerisms, people tell me all the time they see a lot of my dad in me. And, so, that's a great thing because I was fortunate enough to be born into, a Christian family that was part of a wonderful church in Ocala. And that played a big part in my life growing up. Almost everything I think back on and everything that I remember doing as a kid revolved around doing something with people from church. And that was a huge influence in my life and continues to be to this day. And so I was very fortunate to have, I like to tell people, have been chosen by my parents, right? I wasn't birthed by my mother, so, she had to pick me from the litter there in the hospital that day. So yeah. I told my brothers that growing up, I had two younger brothers, and every time they'd get angry or I'd get angry with them, actually, I tell them, hey, look, mom and dad picked me. They had to deal with you, so that was my good comeback for them.
Well, that's remarkable. I mean, and I just have a few thoughts, about some of what you said already. I mean, like, surely that has to do great things for someone's self-confidence, right? I mean, if they come into the picture, it could have gone either way, right? I mean, who knows what kind of family you could be chosen by. But just to be able to throw that retort out, right? To be able to have that perspective about yourself, that you've been picked by someone, that you are special. I mean, surely that has a lot to do with the kind of self-confidence that I know you have, because I know you, and probably everyone else who is around you knows that you have too. So, I mean, first of all, that's interesting that you have that, because I imagine that has had a huge effect.
Yeah, I think for people that I know that were adopted, even at birth, it can go either way. Some of them end up having a lot of questions later in life about, their origin, their birth parents, and things like that, and wanting to reconnect with their biological family. I've never had that. I've never had that desire. I've never had those questions. And I do have a pretty high level of self-confidence, as you mentioned. And I think it has a lot to do with my upbringing. Some of that is the adoption story, but also I think a lot of it has to do with my mom and dad. My dad was in sales during my younger years. Sold lots of different things. So a lot of his time was spent selling insurance products. And he was constantly reading self-help books and positive thinking type things and going to sales trainings and, constantly trying to stay in that positive, upbeat, I can do it, I can accomplish anything I set my mind to type mentality. And I tell people sometimes the story of him coming home from a sales trip one day, and he brought me a teddy bear, and the teddy bear was dressed, in a pinstripe navy suit, and you'd pull a string on the back, and the string would say, "You're a winner, Teddy knows." It would be the first thing it would say. And then you pull the string again, and it would say, "You're a born leader," and you keep pulling it. It would say those things over and over and over again. And, hey, no big deal. But when you pump a young kid full of messages like that and positive, confidence building type things, you can't help but have that rub off on them in some way. And I think I was the beneficiary of that. And a lot of what my dad did in those early ages, I mean, from quotations that he would write on index cards and pin to the bulletin board above his desk, like, when you're not practicing somewhere, someone is practicing, and when you meet, they will win, right? This commitment to things like this guy back here. It's no secret why I have this poster on the wall, Charlie Hustle, Pete Rose, that kind of mentality of I'm going to outwork everyone, I'm going to out hustle everyone, I'm going to do whatever it takes to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish. And those types of messages, implanted into young people, can do a lot of good and go a long way in their life.
Well, I don't think you can put a price on it. And I certainly think it's a very interesting lesson, because I know your dad now. And what I know about your dad is that he is a teacher, and he's been a teacher of, I guess, high school, and a coach to some degree, but I think he was more of an academic instructor for a long time. So, all the successes that come with that role and the influence, the wide-reaching influence that he had certainly applies. But that isn't necessarily the job that you think most people who are super go-getters go into, right? But he still had a great mentality, to be able to implant the kind of messages and the positive energy that you're talking about here in you. And unless I'm mistaken, also in your brothers, because I know your family, and it seems like each of you have some interesting skills, exceptional skills maybe. And surely that same influence just played out differently in each of their lives, because you're not all business people, right? You've got some great diversity in your family.
Yeah, my talents were cultivated on the baseball field. And so I was, of the three of us, I was definitely the athlete in the family. The middle brother, my younger brother, Colt, he's 3 years younger than me. And he's a gifted musician. Does that for a profession. Him and his family have a band called Colt Clark and the Quarantine Kids, you probably heard of. And they're YouTube sensations. Developed that during COVID, but extremely talented, and he's made a good living doing that. And then my youngest brother, Ryan, who's 8 years younger than me, it was very interesting because, growing up, we really weren't that close. I mean, 8 years is a pretty big separation. And when I left home, he was 10, so, I missed a lot of his formative years of his life being gone from home from 10 to, when he left at 18, but he's a talented musician as well, but also a talented actor, voiceover artist, and graphic designer. And so, yeah, a lot of diverse talents within our family. And each of us have also become quite entrepreneurial in what we do. Colt's obviously got his own music gig that he does. We together have started several businesses and done that for the last 18 years or so. And Ryan has got his own gig on the side, apart from working for the Disney Channel. Does a lot of different things on the side with comedy troupes, with voiceover stuff, with acting, and all kinds of things. So that entrepreneurial spirit was implanted in us by our dad probably early on. And I don't want to discount the impact of my mom in this too, because, you mentioned the pivot my dad had in his career from sales to teaching. Well, you can work as hard as you want, but sometimes you're, either the victim of circumstance, or, the market changes on you, or you see an opportunity and you need to pivot because it's a better option for you at that time in your life. And that's exactly what he did. He got tired of the grind of sales and decided that he'd go back to school and get his master's degree. And he did that while I was in high school. Actually, right at the beginning of high school into middle school, and became an administrator in the school system. And all the while, my mom worked behind the scenes, and probably I learned a lot of my work ethic from her, because when we needed extra money, she would clean houses. We would clean the church building as a family. And so we learned the value of hard work and doing jobs that other people didn't want to do all the time. And, scraped out a pretty decent living doing that. But my mom was always working, doing something. And the thing that she's known for, actually, especially within the church family, is her evangelistic spirit and converting a police officer in Ocala who had pulled her over for having too much tint on her windshield. So, that's the kind of personality and the kind of person my mom is, always looking for an opportunity to build a relationship with someone, and always willing to work hard and do the things that no one else wants to do.
Well, that's very interesting. And I'm sure our listeners can probably see some parallels either in their lives or some opportunities in their lives as they raise their kids. I mean, it seems like there's some really practical lessons there about messaging, about work ethic, about no matter where you are, about modeling the kinds of behaviors that your sons and daughters are going to take and run with. We've talked a lot about your confidence level, but I'm interested more about that because, I know people who look confident, act very confident, and talk to me about confidence in you. Is that universal? Is that in every aspect of your life? Or are there chinks in your confidence armor? Or are you just like the kind of person who is just overwhelmingly confident and positive?
Well, there's a lot of things in life that I may portray as being very confident at, but behind the scenes, I'm shaking in my boots, and I think, there's things like public speaking. I don't relish the idea of public speaking. I can get up there and do a decent job and pull it off, but I don't like that all the time. I'm not very confident in myself and the ability to come across as well in that as I would hope to all the time. But even going back to high school days and junior high, I always had a lot of friends, but man, I was not very confident in making relationships with girls. And that was always a challenge for me.
Well,
and
who is, right? When they're in high school.
Very well. So, that was a big challenge for me when all my friends, started dating people and whatnot. Like, I was never very confident in establishing relationships with the opposite sex. And so what I did in that situation, and this is a coping mechanism for me that I even use today, is that, I try to justify it and saying, well, I'm not so good at that. I'm going to leave that to somebody else that's better at that than me, or I'll just dive deeper into something that I am good at, that I'm very confident in, and spend all of my time doing that and tell everyone I'm too busy to do that other stuff.
Interesting. So a playing to your strengths kind of approach really is like, this is what my strengths are, and I'm going to double down there and like leave the other stuff to other people. Now that could work to your disadvantage in finding a woman, because they're going to be all guns. That obviously didn't go that way for you. You found yourself a wonderful woman, it looks like, and you figured out how to like bridge the gap. I certainly see that in public speaking. You do a great job of that when you're called to do it. So, maybe you're shaking your boots, but you don't give that impression. So what is that exactly?
Yeah, I don't know. It's I'm glad to hear that it comes across better than it feels sometimes. But I do think that, one of the things that has continually been reinforced in my life is that it's actually another quote that my dad had that I think about all the time. And it goes like this: our doubts are traitors that make us lose the good we oft might win by fearing to attempt. So if you don't try it, if you don't do it, and you let doubt sink in, it's just working against you. It's a traitor of your life. It's holding you back and keeping you from doing things that you probably can do, and you probably can practice them enough to do them well at some point. But if you never try them, you'll never even start, that journey toward being good at that particular skill. And, that's something that I try to remind myself all the time of, because if you don't ever take that leap of faith, if you don't ever go out on a limb outside your comfort zone, whatever you want to call it, you'll never have the opportunity to build that confidence. And so I have pushed myself quite a bit throughout the years to do things like that. And sometimes it comes from a place of expectation where I feel like people expect me to do this and expect me to do it well. So I've got to do it, and that's a big motivator.
Yeah. Living up to other people's expectations, being driven by that to positive ends is something that will make you or break you. You see a lot of people crumble under that pressure. So you haven't crumbled under the pressure of the expectations. You haven't allowed your doubts to get in your way. Many people do. There's something exceptional going on, right? And maybe it's the support network you've talked about, your parents right there backing you up. I mean, I don't know many people who can have all of these quotes from their dad off the top of their head. So that's really impressive stuff. I love hearing about it. Very, very helpful. Well, talk to me a little bit, Chase, about early decisions that you made in college, your degree track that you took there. Tell our listeners some things that might be interesting about that period of life for you.
Yeah. So, in high school, I had a pretty singular focus, and that was on baseball. And, my goal was to get a baseball scholarship that would help me pay for college. I mean, my family wasn't in a position where they were going to be able to pay for it. And probably around 6th or 7th grade, I got connected through summer camps with Florida College. And those relationships were meaningful to me, meaningful enough to me that I knew I wanted to go to school there. But at the time, they didn't have a baseball program. And then my junior year in high school, they started a baseball program. And, I had received some other offers from some other schools to play in the state of Florida. But it was kind of fortuitous that they started up a program right around the time that I was ready to sign a letter of intent to go to school. And that was very fortunate for me because that was one of my goals, to get a scholarship to play college baseball, to help with the financial side of that, really. I had made the determination early on, probably around my junior year in high school, that, going beyond college, professional ambition, that didn't sync up with my plan for life. And so I hadn't planned on going beyond playing in college, even if I'd been given the opportunity. And so that's how I ended up at Florida College, playing baseball there, being able to attend college with a bunch of my friends for the first 2 years. And great environment to be in, formative from a spiritual standpoint. Great connections made there, like our connection that was formed there. Met my wife there, have lifelong deep connections with people, great friendships from that 2 years at FC. And then from there, I went on to USF and decided I was going to be an accounting major actually at first, and started down the path of becoming a CPA. And I guess about a year into it, decided that finance with a minor in economics was a better way to go. And so I pivoted a little bit, didn't really have to rework a whole lot of courses, but just pivoted into that finance major with a minor in econ. And from there, my path was set kind of to go into a banking or financial services career. And that's kind of where I landed out of college. One interesting thing from a timing standpoint that happened, though, is, I graduated in December of 2001. And we all remember what happened just several months before that with the attack on 9/11. And so when I graduated from USF and went out to find a job, it was slim pickings. A lot of companies had hiring freezes, a lot of uncertainty in the world at that time. We were engaged in a war on terror now, and I landed a credit analyst position with, at the time, Southern Exchange Bank down on West Shore and Kennedy there in the West Shore Business District of Tampa. And that was an interesting job. It was a good opportunity, and exactly aligned with my major, going into finance. And I didn't know until years later how formative that job actually was, even though I stayed there for only 7 months. During that time, I was fortunate enough to underwrite dozens of commercial real estate loans for wealthy, high net worth investors that were buying up commercial properties all over Tampa Bay, some on the beaches of Pinellas County, some in Ybor City, some in downtown Tampa. And I didn't realize it at the time, but what I learned in those 7 months of looking at those commercial real estate loans was going to pay huge dividends down the road as we started to develop our own real estate business and our own real estate rental portfolio, and understanding how banks looked at rental real estate and what kinds of things had to be in place for you to be able to get financed with a bank and to grow your business in that way. So that whole trajectory of going from 100% focused on baseball, landing at Florida College, building incredible relationships, meeting my wife, on to USF, slight change in major, landing at a bank that put me in a position to work with real estate, and then having a real estate career years after that. Kind of fortuitous how that all looks now in hindsight.
Yeah, you can definitely see a trajectory there that makes sense. I want to go back a little bit, if you let me, to the idea that you kind of said that playing baseball as a professional career wasn't a part of your plan for life. So that seems to suggest that you had a plan for life, right, coming out of high school. Or is that, in hindsight, you had a plan? Did you have a plan for life? And was the career track, the coursework that you took, right out of high school into college, was that planned out? Or are all these things kind of the things that you kind of evolved into and learned about yourself as you were in college? Talk about what it means to have a plan for life at the age of 17, right?
Well, one thing that really impacted my plan for life was, as a junior in high school, I was in a program that allowed me to do a mentorship. And I had thought for years that I was going to go into the medical field. I was going to be an orthopedic surgeon. That was something that interested me a lot. It tied in with my love for sports and athletics and all of that. But for 3 months, I had the opportunity to shadow an orthopedic surgeon. And I knew his kids. He was a well-known doctor in Ocala. Well-respected orthopedic surgeon there, and really good at what he did. Learned a lot. It was an amazing experience. I've seen basically up close and personal in the OR every joint in the human body replaced. It was really cool. I enjoy that stuff. I know that some people can't stomach that, but a fascinating experience. But the thing that I remember most from that mentorship wasn't those surgeries. It was sitting down with him in the doctor's locker room one day and him telling me how he only was able to see his family every other weekend. And there's virtue in hard work, but there's a point at which hard work can become too much work. And that was not what I wanted for my life. I didn't want to see my family for a couple hours every other weekend. because I was tied up in an OR somewhere with a laundry list of surgeries to do. I knew family was going to be more important to me than that. And that was my goal for life, was to find a godly woman, to have a family, and to kind of take that path instead of have a long drawn out professional career oriented type plan with marriage and family later on in life. And so that was real formative for me, is getting that perspective from him that day.
That is, I would have to say that's not common, right? I mean, like if you're talking to a young guy in their high school years and they're shadowing an orthopedic surgeon, and instead of being distracted by the appeal of the job and the lifestyle, they're hit by the fact that they're not with their family, right? And that says, that's it. I want to make sure that whatever it is that I'm doing, I have enough time to spend with my family. It seems to me that you're heavily family oriented and heavily socially oriented in a way that many people are not, probably, right? Which I imagine, just takes us all the way back to where we started with just the importance of, the family for you and a great, well-functioning parent unit. And the fact that you were chosen and all that goes into that to make you prioritize that in a way that most young men probably do not, right? So your plan for life not being a workaholic is probably not where most. I was hearing Bill Gates' commencement speech at Arkansas State University or something like that recently, just a few days ago. And his emphasis was like, here are the things that I learned now that I'm, 50, 60, whatever. And number one on that list is you're not a slacker if you slack off occasionally, right? And he was someone who worked exceptionally hard, and he said he situated his desk by his parking lot so he could see which of his employees were leaving early and not coming in early enough. And he was highly driven and very career driven. And I would say that children of boomers, Gen Xers still, and boomers themselves, were very career driven, putting a ton of effort and time into that. And although I think that has certainly played out in Gen Xers and the millennials not having that same work ethic because they probably saw the demise of their families under those kinds of environments, that was not your story, right? Your story is like, I don't want to have that. And I want to have more of a flexible life. So all that's very interesting to me.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, and again, in hindsight, right? Because you don't always realize this stuff at the time when you're in that season of life. But, there is a season for everything, right? The Bible speaks to this, that, there is a season of your life when you should be devoted more to your job and getting yourself entrenched in a career and your studies in school and whatever degree you're pursuing and all of that. And then there's a season where, family is going to become more important. If you're blessed with a good wife and children, that's a new season and it's different and it can't be the same. You can't keep working 60, 70, 80 hours a week when you've got young kids at home. I mean, you can, and plenty of people do it, but to their demise, is my perspective. When I look out at other families that I see where the husband and the wife are both consumed by the workplace, the children suffer. And so that's a very mature statement to make, and one that I can make with a perspective of being married for 21 years and having a 16-year-old, right? So I say that now with all of that experience behind me, but people were telling me this when I was 20. I didn't always listen, right? When you're 18, 20, 22 years old, if you're smart enough to seek advice and you've got a church community or a family community where you've got wise people that can give you advice like this, my advice now to anyone listening that's at that age is listen to what they're telling you. You can learn it yourself by experiencing it through life, but decisions matter. They do. Like, you can only mess up so many times in life and not cause yourself, so much of a setback that life becomes so much more difficult for you. I'm a firm believer in that. And I know some people get lucky, some people get bailed out in life, but if you want to be conscientious and do things and set yourself up early on to live the kind of life where you can be effective as an individual, have a great family, be charitable, be someone who can have an impact on other people and an example people can look to, you got to get these decisions right a lot of the time.
Well, the decisions that you don't put in that category, though, or at least doesn't seem like you had a very clear step-by-step plan for. I mean, you went from hoping to be in orthopedics to then coming out with an econ and finance major. That's very different. And it doesn't seem like you were heavily academically focused in terms of like you had a very clear plan on how your college experience was going to play out. It sounds to me like you probably did very well. I know you did do very well, but that wasn't, a lot of people who just make that planning process for their collegiate career, both undergraduate and graduate, extremely carefully. And they follow it with great discipline, and they think they're going to be majorly thrown off track if they don't get that right? You've got to get your college years right in order to have a good life. Would you say that was true for you? I mean, I'm looking at your timeline there, and would you say that is what happened for you, or was it a little different than that?
Well, during the 2 years I was at the University of South Florida getting the finance degree, I was working part-time for a large bank here in town. And I was just a teller on the teller line. But what I learned from that part-time job, and maybe what even steered me into the finance realm a little bit or solidified my decision to continue to pursue the finance realm, was that banking was a sure thing, right? Banks don't go away. Banks provide stable jobs. Bankers' hours are very attractive. And if nothing else in life, that would give you a great foundation to build on going into the financial services sector. And so I felt like it was a safe play. Also, I was very good at math. I love numbers, right? All that stuff made sense to me. And so in a sense, I felt like, well, okay, I've been given that talent. I can build upon that. I can use those skills that I have with math and numbers and all that in this role. And so it all kind of made sense from that perspective. It wasn't too risky. It wasn't extremely rigorous either, but it was something I felt that would set me up for at least some level of success and stability early in my career.
Gotcha. So that is, again, not necessarily, you're not looking at this as some big risk play where you can go at it hard. You're looking at a stable play or some kind of foundation you're looking to try to maintain. So in retrospect, was that deliberate for your entrepreneurship that was coming up? Because you moved out of college, you moved out of these stable plays into an entrepreneurship role fairly early in life. Was that all deliberate at a part of your life's plan? Or were those things that just kind of happened and you just reacted to?
Well, I think my advice to anybody that's 20 years old or even 18 years old, graduating high school right now, is that most of you are not in a position to take risk. Okay. My opinion and my perspective is that if you play it safe and don't take extraordinary risks at early stages of your life, when you're probably not even capable of evaluating those risks effectively, you're going to do better early on and set a better foundation for yourself to be able to take more risks later in life, right? And I think that's a concept that a lot of young people in college right now don't really understand, this idea of the relationship between risk and reward, and they don't effectively evaluate the risk correctly. There's a lot of risk in doing things that are unconventional when you're 20 years old. And I say that from the perspective of everything you do in life builds upon itself. Okay? So if you want to take a risk and you're 20 years old and you're single, get a day job and take your risks at night and on the weekends. don't go all in on the risky option without any kind of steady income or any kind of training or any kind of, backstop career path. If your parents are uber wealthy and they want to support you in doing that, fine. But that's an outlier, right? Most people need to start out their career with something stable, something foundational that they can build a career on. And if you go after this risky venture up front and it sets you back several years, you just got a whole harder road to hoe down, to get yourself built back on that solid foundation.
Yeah. So sort of like get your house in order before you're willing to take on some of these bigger, both opportunities, but challenges that are ahead of you, right? So the importance of making sure that is in play. Now that traps a lot of people though, right? A lot of people get sucked into that world and have this nice sedate environment. It's low risk. There is comfort and safety there, and getting out of that into an entrepreneurial venture is tough. So again, part of your plan to get out of all that into the entrepreneurial venture, or just you reacting to happenstance in a fortuitous way?
Yeah, I think probably speaking from this perspective now, looking back, I was bound to be an entrepreneur at some point in my life, right? But I think we did it the right way. I think when we started out and cut the cord from a 9-to-5 steady paycheck, we still had wives that were working and supporting us, and we were able to pay our bills, right? We had also worked for 4 or 5 years in industry and cultivated skills and relationships that we were able to bring to an entrepreneurial venture, right? So that's important. I think all of that stuff helped us build a foundation that led us to have a successful entrepreneurial venture. You don't have to have that, and I'm not saying that there's one size fits all for everyone, but you can't go wrong taking a career path that is stable and solid and pays your bills. Because there's other things you can do with your life to fulfill yourself and to use your talents and abilities for good that don't necessarily have to revolve around you owning a business and doing something that may be taking on more risk than you're capable of handling. And especially if you don't have another partner doing it with you, where the two of you together can bring your talents together, your resources together, and possibly have a better chance at success because of that.
Well, so were you looking for it, or would you have taken either, right? Would you have, if your career in banking or whatever else had painted for you a trajectory of opportunity and wealth and appropriate reward, would you have stayed there versus taking this entrepreneurial route? Was that the plan you were looking to pursue? Was there some catalyst within your life that said that's the way you have to go versus staying here? Were you soul searching for that kind of a free opportunity? I think a lot of people want to know. I mean, like, what is it that motivates an entrepreneur to break the ties of all that safety and security and to try something like this? Because it's two roads diverging, right? I mean, once you take one, it's tough to go back to the other.
Yeah, it sure is. I like to say at this point in my life, I'm unemployable.
I get it. Yes.
But yeah, there was totally a catalyst. I mean, the fact that I went into the banking sector influenced that greatly, because one thing that any of you out there who are in the banking industry, good and well that it's not a meritocracy. Everything in a bank is based on seniority. The person who's been there the longest is going to be in charge no matter what. And there's nothing you can do about it. And you can outperform and you can bring in more revenue, more profit, all that for the bank. They're going to give you a tiny little bonus and you're still going to be reporting to someone else. And so that right there taught me that I didn't always want to have a boss. I wanted to be the boss at some point. And I didn't see a clear path to that in banking unless I just wrote it out for 25 years.
Right. And if it weren't banking, would you think, I mean, it's hard to make these decisions or make these have clear perspective in retrospect, especially like 20 years. But if you had chosen a different sector and if it was tech or something there, which was, of course, burgeoning in other markets back at the time where you were coming out of college. That was the early 2000s, but not necessarily in Tampa. Tampa has always been kind of a banking hub and a financial services and customer services hub, and not really a tech hub. But had you chosen a different sector, would you have seen the ability to achieve whatever your life plan is quicker versus going into entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship, by the way, took a ton of your time and energy. I mean, we say that we wanted to be our own bosses, but you're a slave to something, right? And in an entrepreneurship, you're a slave to a company of your own creation. And that is an exacting and brutal boss sometimes, right? So it's not like you're freeing yourself up from all kinds of, disciplined taskmasters and structures. But would it have been a different industry? Could it have been a different industry? Or is this just something in you that had to go this way?
Yes, I think, and I don't want to generalize it too much, but I think for every person, the catalyst to jump ship into an entrepreneurial venture really has two components. One is your risk quotient. Okay, so I've got a lot of friends that are very talented people. They've been very successful in their 25-year careers working as employees in banking or other sectors for that matter. And one of the main reasons why they've never gone out and started an entrepreneurial venture is because they are too risk averse. So they're the ones sitting at home telling themselves all the reasons why this is going to fail and won't work and is going to make them uncomfortable and all of those things, even when they've definitely got the skills and the abilities to launch something and make it successful. So your risk quotient is huge in that. You cannot be too risk averse and then, decide that you want to take on an entrepreneurial venture. They typically, are at odds with each other. And the second component is that in whatever job you're in, whatever your professional or career circumstances, you've got to feel like or know that you can do more or do something better on your own than you can within your company, right? And so I think a lot of people come to that conclusion where they're working in an industry for years and all of a sudden they see an opportunity, they take it up the ladder, take it to their boss or their team or whoever they're working with, they get shot down, or there's some reason why they can't execute on some new idea or some new product they want to launch. And they say, forget these people. I'm going to take this idea or this product and I'm going to go launch it myself over here with my own company and take off, right? We know many success stories like that in corporate America, right? Where someone had an idea, they got shot down, so they left and they took it out on their own and made a success out of it. Happens in the tech world a lot. So I think those are the two things that I see is like, you've got to feel like you can do more and you got to have the right risk quotient.
Yeah. So in stepping out then, tell me, how did you deal? I mean, maybe your personality helped in this in all kinds of ways that we've already talked about. How did you deal with self-doubt? How did you deal with fear? How did you deal with risk as you moved into entrepreneurship? Every one of us has it to some degree. I'm sure you wouldn't say you have none of those things, but maybe a lower quotient than some of your peers. So what did you do with your fears and doubts and in order to make it a success of yourself in entrepreneurship?
Well, I think from a risk perspective, I was always blessed with small opportunities that came along to help stabilize that transition from, career stability with a job into you're on your own, right? We either had clients that would show up that provided us a nice little, monthly income doing a certain thing for them, or we had some kind of opportunity that would come along that would help, just in my mind at least, stabilize the financial side of the entrepreneurial launch. And it wasn't anything extravagant or extraordinary. It was just enough, right?
Right.
It was just enough to get over the hurdle, right?
Right. So it never seemed like a huge risk to you. They seemed like small risks.
Yeah, it was a bunch of small calculated decisions that in my mind, it seemed like the worst case scenario was never that bad.
Right. Well, that helps, right? If you're not ever saying, let's jump off a cliff without a parachute, right? You're talking about really measured and well quantifiable risks. Well, then the risks are almost non-existent. and you have very little self-doubt. And that's, of course, a really good way to deal with that. So that's a lot of wisdom there.
Yeah. Yeah. And, losses teach you valuable lessons. But sustained losses are killers of everything, right? And so, throughout that journey, we had these little nuggets that would come along that would kind of, in my mind, solidify the approach we were taking and the path and kind of provide a financial way forward. But it was never without setbacks, right? It was never without times where you did doubt yourself and say, man, we've got 30 days of cash flow left. We got to get busy, or we got to find some opportunity, or we've got to, engineer some new cash flow stream to be able to pay our bills next month, right? Or we've got to go flip another house, or whatever the case was at whatever, time in the process that was. But I tell people all the time, the most valuable period of our entrepreneurial journey to me was 2008, 2009, post housing crash, financial crisis, where my second daughter Ashlyn was born May 2nd, 2009, and I remember sitting in the hospital when the financial guy came in. He's like, hey, we need to collect that $4,000 copay you have for the birth of a child. And I had nothing. I think maybe I had enough money in my bank to pay my mortgage that month. And that was it, right? It was rock bottom. It was a big low for us. We had acquired a bunch of rental properties. We had lost a bunch of tenants who had lost their jobs. We had rising costs of property taxes and insurance with decreasing rents and increasing vacancy. We had been, kind of strung out on a couple flip projects that we had. We had large amounts of leverage. We had a friends and family fund that was going defunct because of the housing crash. And that was just, at the time, so stressful, full of doubt, full of second guessing, plenty of times where I thought, wow, okay, what job am I going to need to go get, right? But we made it through. And making it through that kind of period in your entrepreneurial journey is an invaluable thing when you come out on the other side, when you've learned lessons like that and how to persevere, how to overcome that kind of situation, and how to avoid doing that in the future. Just stuff that you can't read in a textbook.
I'd like to dig in more to that at another time, I think, because, how do you make it through that kind of a thing? And that's a question. I think it's nice to hear that. And I hear so many entrepreneurs say that they had that kind of a rock bottom experience, but they just survived for one more day, one more week, one more deal. And it was enough, right, to get them through. And the question I think that deserves a lot of thought is, does everyone go through that, right? Is the one more deal really the one more deal? Or is it just that you have enough endurance to turn that last moment, just prolong through whatever that low point is, where you're bumping along the ground for a long period of time until things finally start working? You just can endure it, and you're willing to go through the suffering and the pain long enough to endure, and then the reward comes. Or was it really that the doors would shut and you have to go get a job in a month? What's the truth of that statement and that perspective as you think back? Had the paycheck not come in the next month from whatever deal you were doing, would you really have shut the doors and gone back and got a job somewhere?
Yeah, that's a good question. The seminal moment, I think, in all of that for us is when, and I think this is a trap that a lot of entrepreneurs fall into, is they go down one path, and when it's not as successful as they think it's going to be, they try to pivot to something else. And then before they know it, they're doing 4 or 5 different things, and they're really doing none of them very well, but they're doing all of them okay. And we plowed into property management in 2008, right after the crisis, and went all in on that. And making that choice and that decision to do that one line of business with all of our effort at a time when no one else wanted to do it, And when it didn't look like a popular decision, paid huge dividends for us. And one of the main reasons we did it was because we knew it would provide us a steady income. We didn't have to worry about going out there and making the next deal. We knew we could grow a residual income out of a book of business that would continually grow if we put our 100% effort behind it. And I think that was one of the key lessons that we learned out of that time is, don't try and do everything. Just do something really well.
Yeah. Some of the things I've heard you talk about are not necessarily the characteristics of a high risk tolerant individual, right? Desiring stability in the way you've described here, describing that thing that will be dependable, that you can kind of go all into, but you don't even necessarily really love it, right? I mean, you didn't go into property management because it was your passion. It was part of your life plan, right? It was the thing that would pay the bills. And so you made a success out of it, right? So that really flies in the face of a lot of what they set their goals on, right? They want to do that thing, that passion play that they love the most, right? And they're willing to they say they're willing to throw everything behind that idea. That wasn't you at all, right? I mean, because here you are in property management, or here you are necessarily at a place that wasn't a key part of what your childhood ambitions were, right? And you were just grinding it out.
Yeah, well, one thing you learn as you go through life is your passions change. And so if you start a business simply based on your passion, be rest assured, in most cases, that passion will wane at some point. And then you'll be stuck with a business that you may not love too. And so my philosophy has always been more of, I want to do something that I know is going to work. That if I take my talents and abilities and my skills and I plow in 100%, I can see success. And I don't really care what that is necessarily. It's been property management. Like you said, I mean, how many people aspire to be a property manager? I mean, but we could have done the same thing doing trash collection. We could have done the same thing with a pressure washing business. Had the opportunity been there and we were committed 100% to applying our talents and abilities to making it a success, it was going to be a success. And I think that's the essence of entrepreneurship. It's not that you have a passion for one particular thing in life. It's that you've got a passion for being successful, and you've got talents and skills and abilities that God's blessed you with that you know how to harness, and you know how to plow forward 100% in a singular direction to make sure no matter what you do, it's going to be a success, right? And that, to me, is the essence of entrepreneurship. You should be able to take a true entrepreneur and plug them into any business, any industry, and they will be successful doing it because they know how to do those things.
Well, I love it. I wish we had a little bit more time to dig into some of these things. Maybe we'll do a part 2 because there's a whole lot more to talk about. I wanted to talk about things like, you sold your company. We sold our company together 8 years ago now. And the trajectory that our lives have taken since then has not looked a lot like I would imagine that someone who sells a company at the prime of their professional life would look. So you've made some choices, and here you are. I'd love to know the rationale behind some of those stories, what decisions you've made. I'd love to know how you view your current time utilization, how you see you're optimizing all your resources to fulfill the life plan that we talked a little bit about earlier, spending time with your family, how are all of those things playing together according to what you hoped and wanted them to, and what's next? These are all questions I have for someone who does what you do at a young stage of your life. So maybe we'll kick off and we'll go into some of those things in more detail in the next show. But I just think this has been a fantastic insight, Chase, into some of these little behind the scenes facts of you. Anything else you want to share with us before we go? Any other lessons learned or important little nuggets from your dad, perhaps, you got on your desk somewhere?
Well, other than my dad, I would just emphasize the role that, spirituality and the Bible and being a follower of Jesus Christ has played in a lot of these decisions that you make in life, because without an eternal perspective to your life, you don't understand the day-to-day as well as you should. And you end up making decisions that are for the moment and not for eternity. And I think I can't understate how important that is, and how greatly that has shaped my perspective on what I do and how I choose to spend my time even now, being in a fortunate situation where I don't have to go to a 40-hour-a-week job. I don't have a lot of other obligations in my life that take me away from doing things that I think I can be very effective at, and most of them in a charitable way. So I would just offer that up as something that's foundational and sentinel in your approach to life.
Well, I love it. And Chase, has been a real treat for me. Even though I know some of these things, it was great to kind of put them in this kind of format and talk with you about them. So thanks for being transparent and sharing all these stories with us. I look forward to continuing this conversation soon. All right.
Definitely, man. Appreciate it. Love this opportunity to chat, and I can't wait to turn the tables on you.
Oh man, it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait.